Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie, and I'm interviewing Randy today. The date is August 13th, 2022, and we're interviewing at her home here in San Diego. Can I start by asking you your date and place of birth?
Place of birth, Cedar Rapids, Iowa,
And what date?
3/19/22. Well, yeah,
Okay, 1922.
1922.
And what were the names of your parents and their occupations?
Okay. My mother's name was Laura Mildenstein, and she died of pneumonia at 36, so she was pretty young. I was 9. And my father was Clyde Randolph, both of them from a little town in Iowa, and their parents were farmers, of course. My father was a salesman for a produce company. They had big produce companies, and they bought all kinds of food, and then he would go to the little store, home, mom and pop stores, and take orders for what they needed, canned food and fresh vegetables, and the little towns around Cedar Rapids.
And did any members of your family serve in the military?
Yes, my dad was in World War One.
All right. What schooling did you have before you entered the military?
I graduated from high school in 1940 and went to the University of Iowa and took a 5-year nursing course. In those days, we could take 2 years of liberal arts at the university and take sciences like biology and chemistry and anatomy at the school, and then go across the river, and the Cedar River ran through the university, and go across the river and go to the hospital. And then I started my nurse's training at the hospital, and I stayed for 1 year. The war had happened to start, and we got into it. And after a year and about 2 or 3 months, I decided I didn't want to be a nurse anymore. So 2 of us left school and went to Rockford, Illinois. And I worked in a defense plant there in Rockford for 6 months.
And how did you get connected there?
Well, they were looking for people because they were losing all the boys that were working on. They had converted from J.I. Case Company was a big farm equipment company, and they made tractors and stuff for the farmers in Iowa. And they converted to B-26 wings, and then they started losing all the boys because they had to go to war. So they went to the colleges and looked for people that would come and work. And so 4 of us, 4 girls, decided we'd go and try it. So we did. And we got 4 of us roomed in 1 room in the house.
Wow.
It was the Shipleys in Rockford. And then finally we got an apartment. But they worked the day shift in the supply room, the other 3 girls. And I worked the night shift, and I did sheet metal work. It was making what we called gap covers for the leading edges of the wings on a B-26. In those days, all the electrical equipment was in the leading edge of the wing. And they dropped down, and so I made the covers between the sections.
That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah.
How did you learn to do that? What was your training?
I didn't learn until I got on the job, and that was not, I didn't know much about the drills and countersinking and forming metal sheets for things.
Uh-huh.
So I just learned. Everybody had to learn what they were doing.
Yeah. And did the environment feel more kind of like a job, or did you feel like you were adding to the war effort?
Well, I thought I was adding to the war effort, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know that we did a real good job.
I'm sure you did okay.
I heard later that the wings dropped off the B-26,
Oh, really?
and I don't know whether they were just telling us that or
Uh,
to make sure we did it right or not. But
how long did you work there?
6 months, and then I decided I didn't want to keep that up forever.
So what'd you decide
And
next?
I was sitting in the bus station in Chicago, and they had already taken women into the Army and the Navy, but the Marines hadn't. And just a couple weeks before I went into Chicago, I was going in for a play or something, a movie, and the Marines started taking women. And while I was in the bus station, I just, for something to do, rode the bus into Chicago and sat in the bus station and then went home. And a bunch of Marines went by. They were on their way from boot camp. They had just finished boot camp someplace, I don't know, and they were catching a bus to go to their next station. And they all looked pretty good. So I decided that might not be a bad idea, and I called my friend and that one of the girls that I was living with, and one of them said, "Yeah, I'll go." So 2 of us joined the Marine Corps in Chicago, and we joined on January 4th of 1944. And then they gave us until March to go home, get our stuff together, and tell our families. And
What was your family's reaction when you told them you were going to the
my
Marines?
father was very patriotic, so he was very happy. He
sure,
would have liked to have had a boy,
Yeah.
a son, to go. But
I'm sure you made him proud.
yeah,
And so what was your initial training in March?
boot camp
Uh-huh.
was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It's called, the little town was New River, North Carolina. But most everybody knows Camp Lejeune. And we were sent there for boot camp. That was a month. And we learned all the history of the Marine Corps, and they really indoctrinate you into being very proud you're a Marine. You don't dare do anything to bring any bad reports in.
Yeah.
So, and then you have a choice of what you want to do when you finish that. And the girl that went in with me wanted to be an officer. And so she applied for officers training school, and I wanted to drive trucks or cars. And so I applied for motor transport school. And I got motor transport school, and she didn't get the officers training, so she went to motor transport too. And that was a month of training on learning how to drive any kind of car and back it up and turn it around, and up to a 2.5-ton truck. That was as much as we could drive.
Yeah.
And so she was sent at the end of motor transport school. She was sent to Quantico. No, she was sent to San Diego, and I was sent to Quantico. But first, I took a mechanics. I wanted to learn a little bit about the engine. And I learned how to change spark plugs in those days.
Wow.
But now I can't even find them. But anyway, I was sent to Quantico, Virginia, and she was sent to San Diego. And I started driving a staff car, which was like a Woody, you know. And I would get a couple of officers. They would assign me to a couple of officers, and I'd drive them up to Washington, and they'd go eat someplace, and I'd have to sit in the car and wait for them while they went in to eat, because an enlisted person can't associate with officers. So I did that for a month, and that was not much fun.
Yeah.
So I asked for a truck, and I got a garbage truck, and I had two private. I was a private. I hadn't gotten a strike yet, and I had two black boys in the back of the truck, and we went around Officers Hill and picked up their GI cans, and they picked up the GI cans and put them in the truck, and I drove them. And that's when I got in trouble with the general.
How so?
I crossed in front of the general's car when the star, anytime they took the general out, the commandant of the base, they had a star on the front. And if it was covered, the general wasn't in the car. If it was uncovered, he was. So there he was down at the intersection down the road, and I saw it coming, and the star was not covered, so that meant he was in the car. And I was supposed to stop, back up, and let him come out in the intersection first. You never go in front or around a general. But I didn't. So by the time I got the trash out of the garbage truck and got back to the motor transport garage, the word had gotten back. The chauffeur had told the captain, and so I got called up for office hours, and they weren't happy at all with women on the base at that point, and so he was going to make an example of me. So I got 2 months of mess duty, and one of them was in the scullery, and one of them washing dishes, and one of them was peeling potatoes in the vegetable room. And I did my 2 months there, and then they gave me a push broom, that kind of a broom, and a stick with a nail on the end of it. And I had to go around picking up cigarette butts and sweeping the gutters at the Quantico. And I did that for 9 months.
Wow.
And I couldn't get transferred. I tried and tried to get transferred. Finally, they did. They transferred me. Well, my hand, in the wintertime, it was terrible. My hands would crack. It was dry. It was awful. But they still thought I was an example, I guess, of what you shouldn't do. So anyway, they finally transferred me to San Diego, and I came out here to the base, the Marine base. It wasn't a recruit depot in those days. Of course, the war was on, and so the boys would come in, and we'd take a 2.5-ton truck. They wouldn't let us drive people. They wouldn't let the boys that were coming in on the ships get on our trucks, but we carried the luggage. So they'd bring them back to the base here for R&R, and we'd bring their luggage back. So that's what I did then until December. And in December, they said, anybody that will stay in until we just finish with them, we'll give them a sergeant's rating. I had made, when I transferred to San Diego, I had gotten my corporal bar by 2 chevron. So they said they would make sergeants out of us if we would stay in as long as they needed us.
Oh.
So my friend and I agreed to go. And we were living on subsistence. They paid our room and gave us money to live on. And we worked 4 hours a day at 3rd and Townsend Depot, making train reservations for service personnel. And they sent all the boys that came in, they sent them to home to where they enlisted. Like, I couldn't go back to Cedar Rapids because I'd enlisted in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I got a train ticket to Chicago. No flying in those days. And as a matter of fact, the airline was just then beginning to put women on. So I stayed there until they said I didn't need to work anymore, and that was August of 46. So I was in 2.5 years, and then I got out. I got an honorable discharge, and I came down to Los Angeles, and I lived in LA.
Wow, that was a great career.
Pardon me?
That was a great career.
Oh, it was. It was the beginning of good career. I made a lot of friends. And they were all over the country then by that time. By the time the war was over, it was fun.
I have a few questions about your military career, a few more. What were some of your favorite things to do in like your free time when you were in duty?
They had, we'd go downtown to the bars, and they'd have dancing. Everybody was dancing all the time, jitterbugging in college, and then when we got in the service, that was about the only thing to do, that and movies. And of course we went to a lot of movies, and they always had newsreels, and you were always looking see if you could find anybody you knew on them. Mm-hmm. Never did, but almost everybody, all the guys that I went to college with went in the service that I knew very well. The athletes were in the service. Most all of them were killed too. So a lot of them were.
Were you allowed to spend time with the other male Marines, or did they want the women and men separate?
No, they didn't. They didn't particularly care about us. As a matter of fact, we were more or less isolated. We had our own barracks. It was like a big Quonset hut in most places. Here it was a building at the San Diego Marine Base. We had our own building, and it was a great big room with double bunks, and then a metal, like in a gym, mm-hmm. Metal. Well, I guess school too, where you put lockers.
Lockers, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I got the name Randy, because my maiden name was Randolph, and up until that point I was called either Bobby or Bertie, and there was a girl in the barracks that was named Bertie, and she was already there when I came, so I had to, when somebody yelled Bertie in the barracks, both of us had snapped too. So I changed it to Randy then, and I've been that ever since. So.
Did you experience any, I guess, you think firsts as a woman in the military? Did you have any experiences you feel like you were paving the way for women?
Well, I don't think at the time that I thought I was paving the way, I didn't think they were going to ever let women back in the Marine Corps, because I didn't think they liked. I know they didn't like them, and they even to this day, when you see some of the World War II veterans, they will admit they didn't want the women around. We had a nickname, and that was the one thing that the Marines did not want. They did not want us to be called anything like the women in the Army were called WACs. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what they called the Navy women. But they got the name started, BAMs. And we said that meant Beautiful American Marine. But that isn't what they said. Mm-hmm. They said it meant broad-ass Marines. So they made sure that we knew we were never to be called BAMs. Well, the first time out of boot camp, about 4 of us were at New River looking for something to eat, and this little drunk Swabby sailor walked up to us and said, "Oh, a whole bunch of BAMs." So I said, "Don't you call us that." So he swung at me.
Wow.
And I stepped back, but I swung at him then. And I connected, he didn't connect.
Good for you.
But it didn't knock him down.
Yeah.
It wasn't hard enough to knock. But I decided, well, if they want to call us that, that's okay. I didn't want to get into a fight with anyone. But yes, I felt that I was discriminated against because they wouldn't transfer me. Mm-hmm. I mean, other people could get transferred in 6 months in one station and they could move.
Yeah.
But they didn't let me move. Just because I crossed in front of the general. So
when you're doing those car trips, did the officers and the higher ranking members treat you with respect, or was there some sexist activity there too?
Oh, they wouldn't even talk to me when I was driving. And one time in Washington, 4 of us were going to go have a drink at the Willard Bar. It was the Willard Hotel was just down the street from where Lincoln was shot. So we were, it was hot and sweaty, and we had to stay in uniform with a tie and shirt, and we couldn't, had to have your hat on and your gloves and So we were looking for a nice, cool place to sit down and have a drink, and then we were going to go to the movies. And so we walked into the Willard Hotel, and there was the bar, and you could see into the room. It was dark because they had the air conditioning on, and they had everything closed up to keep it cool. And you could see there was a booth, but there was a line every place in Washington. Everything was lined up. The military was all over the place. So, of course, there was a line, and we got in the line to go get a seat and waited, and finally got up to the maitre d' and said there were 4 of us, and we wanted to come in. He said, oh no, he was sorry he didn't have any place for us. Well, there was a couple standing right beside us. He was an officer, and he had his girlfriend or somebody with him. And they were standing not in line. They were standing outside. And he told us, no, we couldn't go in. And he looked at the couple, the officer, and took them in and seated them.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was that way all over Washington. Everything was for officers, and there were a lot of them, a lot of junior officers mostly, because the higher ranking officers I never did see, except when I had office hours when I got in trouble. And then I saw the captain. But no, there was a lot of discrimination.
Mm-hmm. How would you guys take in the news of the wars happening in Europe? Were you guys always following
Oh, yes.
who's winning?
We did. We followed it on the newsreels. We didn't get newspapers, and we didn't have radios. We just would follow it on newsreels and the movies. And if they had an assembly of any, they would tell us like if a platoon or a group went from here, or Elliott was the base close by here, and they'd announce it, you know, where they were in the Pacific and how they were doing. And I really was scared. I didn't think we were going to win. I really didn't. It was scary. And then when they surrendered, when the Japanese surrendered after the atomic bomb, I was really happy that I'm sorry to say, bombed, but it did stop the war, and it did save a lot of lives. But they at that point, when the war was over, they said that we, the girls in the barracks, should not go downtown here in San Diego, because this was a Navy town. It wasn't a Marine town. And all the Navy boys were out, and they were just going wild because they wouldn't have to go overseas, you know. And nobody wanted to. Everybody knew it was bad. They were getting killed right and left. So it wasn't a good situation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of the people nowadays, well, even then, you know, there were a lot of conscientious objectors, even in those days.
Mm-hmm.
They had a lot going to Canada and didn't believe in the war. And
Yeah.
it isn't new, I guess.
All right. Yeah. Do you want to talk now about you leaving the military? You said you went to Los Angeles to leave.
Oh, you want me to talk about what I did afterwards?
Well, what date you left, and then what you did after.
Okay, I left the Marine Corps, and then decided that we were going to come down to Los Angeles. I had a friend that lived down here in LA. So we got the girl that I went in with, and I got a house in LA, rented a little tiny house, and we started looking for jobs. And we, at that point, they were giving, it was called the 5220 Club. And we got $20 a week for 52 weeks when we got out of the service. So we could live a little bit on that. And that's how we got the house and were able to eat. And we looked around for jobs and finally took care of the girls' children next door. and did her ironing and kept hunting for a job. And finally, we decided that there was an ad in the paper for United Airlines stewardesses. So we decided we'd go try. And I didn't want to go with United at the time. I thought it was too conservative an airline. I wanted to go with Pan American because they flew overseas. And I thought that was more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they gave 2 tests. And I thought, I'm not that smart. I probably won't pass them. I better go and find out what they're like. So the other girl that I was with wanted to go with United, but she didn't want to be a stewardess because there were a lot of accidents at the time, and they heard a lot about pilots in the war and stuff. So we went to the United, took the tests, and I passed them. And I was so surprised that I decided I better not take a chance on doing it again. So I went with United and stayed for 15 years.
Wow.
And then in those days, when you got married, you had to quit. And so I got married in 1960. So that's my story.
That's a lot, yeah. Do you have any message today for women in the military?
I think all young people should have at least a year to maybe 2 years of military service when they get out of high school, because you're pretty young. I'm sure you don't feel it and I didn't feel young at the time, but when I look back at it, I think I learned so much going into the service.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready to go to college. I needed that discipline, and I got it in the service. I needed to be told, look, you're not going to get everything you want. And nobody is going to make you happy. You have to make yourself happy. And you just have to conform to what's going on and be happy with it, or you'll be miserable the rest of your life. So
mm-hmm.
I think yes. And I belong to an organization called, we call it CA2. It's a group of Marines, women in the service, and we talk to a lot of the girls that are just coming in. And most of the girls that are in the Marine Corps at this point have some problem that they didn't want to face, or their boyfriend was going into service. And so they're in not because they have to be, but because they wanted to get their life straightened out. And they do. And the Marine Corps really can help you. Or, military. The Navy and the Coast Guard, they're all good branches, and they all teach. And you can go to college, and you can take all the courses you want. So I think everybody should have at least 2 years. That's what I'm for.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know whether that's good or bad, but
yeah. All right. Well, if there's anything else you'd like to add, feel free to share it. But
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
so much.